Okay, I clicked the go live button, so that means we're alive, I hope. Welcome, and this is exciting. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I am in Northern Virginia, and I want to talk about upgrading to Informix 14 and or migrating to the cloud. It seems like one of the jokes among my staff is that we're called migrating or us, because it seems like all we do nowadays, the bulk of our projects are upgrades and migrating projects. I am Lester Knutsen. I've been working with Informix since 1983. Was part of the starting of the International User Group and the Washington area Informix User Group. And this is pretty much all we do is Informix. And this started out as a talk on upgrading to Informix 14, but then I realized it's really a bit more complicated than that. And a lot of what I see happening, because Informix upgrades are so easy, is migrating to the cloud or to a VM system. And so I want to spend about half of this talk talking about that. I'm going to show you a very quick Informix 14 upgrade. We'll actually do a demo. I have here in the right window, if you scroll down to it, a Informix 12 server that we will upgrade live in just a few minutes. And then I want to talk about migrating to the cloud or virtual machines, because I think that's where a lot of the work is. And there's an easy way and the hard way. And the hard way is there because sometimes the easy way doesn't work. And I'll talk about that. And I'm going to end the talk with 7 example scripts that you can use to help you migrate. First of all, if you go to our website, I'll have the scripts that I'm going to talk about today and some resource links available. So 14. It came out last March or April. I was teaching a class and it came out 2 weeks before I taught the class. And so I said, well, let's just try it for the class. And it was really kind of amazing. It worked all during the class. I had 2 students go home and upgrade themselves. One of them came to the class saying, hey, we're going to need some help migrating. And I was pleasantly surprised when they went back and did it themselves. It's more secure. It's got a lot of great capabilities. One of the best ones is InformixHQ, which I'll talk about. And the great part about InformixHQ is if you get that installed and up and running, you can go back and monitor a version 12.10 database with it. So I want to talk about upgrading, and I've got a upgrade project plan that I will share with you guys real quick. I can find the right window with it. That's a migrating project plan. Sort of have a detailed step-by-step what you need to do to upgrade, and that's going to be available on our website after this is over. So why upgrade? First of all, is if you're on Informix 11.7, end of support is this year, and you need to start planning. And I think it's just as easy to upgrade to 14 and skip 12 if you're on 11.7. I did a webcast last year on installing and upgrading, and this first part is a lot from that webcast. When you get Informix, and this tripped me up, it's tripped up most everybody I've talked to. There is one binary with multiple license installers. And if you just download the binary like you're used to with version 12, all you get is the developer edition. You need to get a Java install filer, one of these, that tells you what you're licensed for. The most common one I see is Workgroup Edition or Enterprise Edition. And you want to get the Java installer for that. And then you can run IDS install, and it will see that you have that addition in your directory, and it has to be in the same directory, and it will just install it. You can also install it running it with Java. You need Java 1.8 to install it. A couple of other changes. The InformixHQ is included, and after you do the install, it will be in InformixHQ. JDBC and SDK are not included, whereas in 12 they were included. They're a separate download, and they're very easy to go download and get them and install them. So there are two things you need to install. First, the server, and then after you've installed the server, install the SDK, and that's a separate download, and it's very simple to do that. Now, basically, my steps are you create a directory for the new software, install it, create your own config files. If you have any user-defined UDRs that need to be compiled, you need to recompile them. And to do that, you'll need the SDK with the ESQLC compiler. Step number 5 is you want to check and fix any in-place alters if you have them. Now, in-place alters are a huge advantage Informix has. And when you change data types from one type to another, instead of going through the whole database and copying and rebuilding the table, it just marks it and marks that as a change. Let me give you an example. I have a database table called zip. I'm going to modify the city to 30 characters. And afterwards, I've got it set up. Now, if I go look at the table, it will tell me that there are 711 pages at the old version. There's 0 pages at the new version. And it instantly did that upgrade, and it marked all those pages that the old data was on as the old version. And it won't convert them to the new version until I need to. You can do that by updating or inserting a row, or as you use the rows in the background, the sysadmin database has a task that will also run and do it. This makes your alters very quick when they meet the rules of an in-place alter. Now, let's insert a new row. And what happens then is now I have one page at the new page. So I've got a table that has a mix of old and new pages. And that's the problem with an in-place alter when you do an upgrade. The problem is not the in-place alter. The problem is if you went back, it's harder to go back when it has some pages at one version or the other. A quick way to get rid of in-place alters is to do a dummy update, where you just update the column and set it to equal itself. And now you can see all my pages are at the new size. You notice it took more pages. This is the other advantage of in-place alters, is it saved space. The new rows on the new pages take more space. The other thing you want to do before you do an upgrade is do the on checks and verify that all your data is good. You don't have to do this. It's just wise to go ahead and check your database and make sure everything's going to be okay. Another key part of an upgrade is to have a backup plan. You want to do a level 0 backup. You want to have a contingency plan. Sometimes if an upgrade fails, in the rare, and I haven't seen this happen with 14, but in the rare times where it's failed, the easiest way is just to restore from a backup and you're back to where you were before the upgrade. Then you want to stop all access, bring the server down into single user mode and shut down the server. And I'm going to show you this. Change the symbolic links, check your on config file, and then start the server. And boom, you're up and running and you're ready to go. After you've done an upgrade, it's best practice to update stats on all the database and tables, on all the procedures, and update stats high on anything that needs it done, and then you're ready to go and enable user access. Also, after you've done testing the upgrade, perform a new backup so that if you had to restore the next day, you could restore to the new version and not have to go back to the previous version. Good idea to do the verify the system pages again, run a bunch of on checks. Now, let me give you a very quick example. I've done most of this, but I've got a few things that are running. I've got a version 12 server. I'm going to upgrade to 14. I've already done all the checks, so I'm just going to shut the server down. And change to root. I have 14 installed. You can see Informix dir points to 12. I'm going to remove Informix. And then I'm going to create a symbolic link from 14 to Informix. And now if I do an onstat-v, it says I'm at version 14. I'm going to exit out and start up Informix. And over here, I have a window with my log file showing, and it says, okay, I'm starting the server. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff, and you can see it did conversions. It does all these conversions in place while it's doing the upgrade. It's a good idea to wait until the upgrade is finished before you connect to it. And now I am online running version 14. So the upgrade itself is very easy. That was the point I wanted to make here. And you can do it very quickly. One thing I didn't do, which I would recommend when you start up after the upgrade, use the W flag, and that will force the oninit to wait until you're completely started before you get the command prompt back. Otherwise, Informix will start, go into the background, and continue doing the conversion, and then you'll get the command prompt back. So I see some good questions in the chat. I will follow up after that's done. Now let's go back to OAT and let's do a reload. And it recognizes that I'm now at 14. And it tells me my uptime and what I'm running. Now, the next couple of slides have to do with OAT. I am going to skip them because I have a lot of slides, and doing a couple of dry runs yesterday, I'm going to go over time if I do it. But this is the best thing that's happened. I'm teaching a class right now. I will show you a little bit. And each of the students has created a server. So we're running 9 servers right now. And I can sit here and go click on any server, see the status, look at the storage, see what spaces are out there, add a space, add logs, do all the hard command line stuff we used to have to know the commands to do. It's very simple to get up and running, and it works really well. And I would go get 14 just to get OAT, because you could run it with 12. If you're running version 12, you want to run OAT. I mean, not OAT, InformixHQ. OAT was the old name. Sorry about that. Let me get past these slides. There's all kinds of good stuff you can do. And let's talk about migrating. There's what I call the easy way and the hard way. The easy way works great. When you have to move to the cloud or to a virtual machine, but there's certain limitations and you can't always do it. And it seems like all the projects I've been involved in the last year, we've had to do it the hard way. The simplest way, if you can upgrade, is to do a Dbexport, Dbimport. Now that means your database has got to be small enough so you can unload the whole database to disk. It does it in ASCII files. It's very portable. You can go from one operating system to another. You can go from one operating system to a virtual machine in the cloud or a virtual machine someplace else. The one disadvantage is it does lock the database during an export, and because it's serial, single-threaded, it may be slower than the other options. You can also do a backup and restore. Now, this assumes that you're moving from the same operating system and the same version of Informix. Much harder when you're moving to the cloud. But if you're moving from a Linux machine to a Linux on VM, you can use backup and restore. Either on tape or on bar, you do a backup, you do a restore, you roll forward the logs, and you're up and running on the cloud or the virtual machine. Enterprise replication. There's a new command called CDR Migrate Server. And the key to enterprise replication is there is no downtime. This new command makes it simpler. I first did this back in the days of version 11, going from version 7 to version 11. And it was a very manual process then, because we had to set it up. The key, if you're going from doing it manually, is to do all the commands and setup on the version that is the oldest. So we did all the setup on version 7, pointing at a version 11 server. 7 doesn't understand all the ER commands that are in version 11, but 11 did understand all the commands that were in version 7. And the CDR Migrate Server command is much simpler, automates a lot of the space creation. The key is when you use enterprise replication or CDR, there is no downtime. You basically bring up another server, replicate everything to that server. The two servers stay in sync. And then you're ready to go. And at some point in time, when you decide the new server has all the data and is in sync and working out well, you break the replication and you're on the new server. So here's a link to CDR Migrate. This is a very nice process, and they've done a very good job on simplifying it with servers. The one disadvantage to enterprise replication is you really need a primary key on every table for enterprise replication to work. If you don't have a primary key, there are options, but then it becomes harder. So if you have a database without primary keys, this may not work for you. Another new utility Informix has is Ifxclone. And this will take a snapshot of a server. This is also used for setting up HDR, and it will take a snapshot of a server and all the data and move it someplace else. Again, it has to be the same OS, same version of Informix for it to work really well. So if you're going from 12 to 14 on the cloud, this may not work for you. I want to also mention my good friend Art Cagle. He has a program called MyExport that works like Dbexport. It does automate a lot of things that I'm going to talk about, but it does get you set up and running fairly quickly. Just a quick response to a question in the chat about the SQL API for doing in-place alters. Go look in the sysadmin database, and if you're running InformixHQ, look at the tasks there. There's a task that goes through, particularly in 14, and I forget when it came in 12, but it goes through the database and looks for in-place alters. Or just put the function there. That's what you want to go look at, and go look at the code for that, and that will see how in-place alters are dealt with. So let's talk about the hard way. And this is when you're going from one operating system to another, Solaris to a VM in the cloud, or to AIX to Red Hat. It's also when you don't have primary keys, so you can't use ER. It's also helpful when you have very large tables that you want to restructure. And this is, I think, a key point. I was working with a client recently that had started out on version 7 where everything was limited to 2 gigs. And so they had their whole partitioning scheme based on 2 gig DB spaces. And we decided it was time to take a look at that and update their partitioning to use the new automatic partitioning that's in Informix 12 and 14. And to do that, we needed to restructure all their large tables. So that became part of our migration plan. It was not just migrating from one server to the cloud, it was also taking their large tables and repartitioning them. Another one that I've seen lately is a code set change. If you decide you're going international and need to change the basic code set of the database, really the only way to do it is to unload and reload all the tables in the database. That's not an easy operation because you're changing the basic alphanumeric characteristics of a database, and you really want to unload and reload to do that. The other advantage to the hard way is you can minimize downtime by parallelizing as much of the process as possible. And I want to describe sort of the rules I use to go through and do this. So the first step is build a project plan. And I usually end up with something like this. I'll show you one, a big worksheet with all the steps and who's going to do it and who's going to create the different parts of the project plan, and implement it, and like to have a start and finish date and time, and then actually keep track of the time that it took to do the different parts of it. Now, you need to plan on at least 3 runs. I know this seems like a lot of work, but you want to make sure everything works and you don't mess up. The first run is to single thread test every script. So you want to run the first time testing every script one at a time. The second run, and you may do more than one run here, is to run the scripts in parallel. And this is to stress test all the scripts and to validate production times. This is where I start worrying about times. If I put these 2 scripts together and run them at the same time, am I going to finish faster? And, I've usually found you can get a 4 to 8 terabyte database down to easily 6 to 12 hours if you have good hardware, just by running things in parallel. And then the final part of the project plan is the actual final production migration. That's the worksheet I showed you earlier. Now, configuring the new server. The first part of the project plan is setting up a new server. And I did a webcast in February, and this is the basic scripts. And so instead of going over them now, I'm going to point you to them. To go download, I've got 10 scripts to configure a new server. And everything from setting up the root DB space, the server, the physical log, the logical logs, the temp DB space, the data spaces, indexes, and making all the chunks extendable. If you don't know it, this is a huge tip. One of the new features in 12 and 14 is you can make a chunk extendable. And that is, if there is space and the chunk starts to fill up, it will automatically extend. I also have a cleanup script and a couple of example on config and SQL host. So for that to work, you want to take your large tables and do them in parallel. Usually what I find works best is I say a table that's over 2 gigs is one that we need to look at. And if a table requires special partitioning, we also need to look at it. You also need to think about how many CPUs and how many CPU VPs are on your server. If you're going to run things in parallel and you plan to run 16 parallel jobs, but you only have 4 CPUs on your server, they're not going to run in parallel. They're going to wait. So you need to limit the number of parallel jobs to the number of CPUs. You also want to limit PDQ priority. One of the migrations we did a couple of years ago, one of my DBAs was working with me on this, and he came to me and said, everything's running except for this one job. It's not even started. And we went and looked, and he had set PDQ priority to 20 on all the jobs. Well, 20 means you can run 5 jobs. That's saying, give me 20% of the resources. And so 5 jobs uses 100% of the resources. And the 6th job was waiting for one of the other jobs to finish. If and this is what we ended up doing, we ended up just changing it to run at 15 PDQ priority, 15% of the resources. Worked great. All 6 jobs ran at the same time. And so what I like to do is I divide the tables in the database into 2 groups, the normal tables, which are less than 2 gigs, and the parallel tables, which are greater than 2 gigs. And so then I have 2 gigs, 2 sets of tables to work with. And typically by doing that, you might have 600 tables in the database. Maybe only 20 or 30 or 40 of them are going to be in this range. And so you spend most of your time focused on those 20 or 30 or 40. Just on partitioning, I had a webcast 2 years ago on range partitioning and how to make it automatic. This is a key thing. If you're looking at partitioning, quit doing it manually. Make it automatic so that partitions get added automatically when you start a new month or start a new year. This makes life so much easier for your DBAs. And it's a key factor I look at when we're dividing things up here is any table that needs to be partitioned becomes part of the parallel group that we do. So this is the hard work. Take a DB schema minus SS of the database to a file, and then split that file into 9 separate scripts. The first script is going to be most of your tables. The second script, and you might do 3 or 4 of the second script, is for your large tables that you're going to change the partitioning on or do something about. Then you want a script for external table, a script for permissions, a script for procedures, a script for synonyms, a script for triggers. And then you want to take indexes, and just like you did with tables, divide indexes into normal indexes, which are indexes for the normal tables, and then indexes for your large tables that you want to do parallel bills on. What I've found a lot of time is this step, doing the parallel bills for the large tables of indexes, will actually be longer than the loads themselves. So you unload the data, and you can use HPL or external tables. I tend to like external tables. You want to lock the database so that the data is not changing while you unload it. And you want one job stream that's all the tables under 2 gigs. Just run that serially. And then a second set of stream for tables that are going to be run in parallel. And the last thing, and this is really important, is you want a QA script because you want to quickly check the data after it's loaded. And you need to run the QA script while the database is locked and you're unloading it so the numbers don't change. And I'm going to show you how to generate a QA script. The QA script should be 2 things. It should be row counts, and then you need to pick a key column in the table that can be summed and do a sum on that key column. Now that's the part that takes a little bit of work, and I'm going to show you a solution I've found that works pretty good for that. Some tables don't have anything to sum up, and then you can only do the row count. Others do. Then you want to build your new database. And I have a script that creates the database in a DB space with no logging. And this is the key. You're going to be loading. You want to have all this done with no logging and turn logging on at the end. Then you want to create the normal tables and then create the parallel tables and have 2 scripts for this. And then you want to create the external tables that you're going to load from. And then you load the normal tables, and then you run parallel jobs to load the large tables. So let's say you have 6 CPUs. I'm just picking an example. I would plan on running 6 parallel jobs. One of them is going to be the normal tables. So that means I can take all my other large tables and divide them up into 5 job streams. And what I'll typically do is take the biggest table and the smallest table, put them together in the same job stream, next biggest, next smallest, put them together. And that way you get job streams that are about equal balance. You want to load the data with no indexes and no constraints. So you want to turn off constraints on any data that you're loading. And then you want to create the permissions. You want to create any procedures. All this, remember, you took from your DB schema, you divided it up into these files, create the synonyms, create the triggers, and then create the indexes in one job stream for the normal tables, the smaller tables, and then a parallel job stream for all the other tables. I see a question from Benjamin on performance. Let me come back to that. Checking the data. This is key. You want to be able to confidently say all the data loaded and it matched. And one way to do that is check row counts. The other is to have some key metric in every table that you sum. Now, some tables you don't need to do that. For others, you do. Account balance would be an example, or invoice amount would be another example. And you really want to save this in a table so you can automate it. So you can run the same script on your source database and your target database, and then have the data in a compare, and then you're just looking for where they don't match. And then the fun part comes deciding why they don't match. Now, if you've done the unload on a locked database, I've never found them not matching. But it's always, I think, a good reassurance to make sure that the numbers match. Now, scripts to help you do this. I've got 8 scripts. I've only got 7 on the slide. I added one more last night after I did this to help you do this. And that's what I want to spend the last bit of this talk going over. And I'm going to jump over here to my system. And I'm going to show you these scripts. I've got in the slides, you have the SQL for the scripts there too. The first one is, and I'm going to pick, I've got 3 benchmark databases. Benchmark 3 is the larger one. The first one says it goes against the SysMaster database, and its job is to find me all the tables that are, and you can change this. I have this now at 1 gig. I typically, if I'm doing it on a real production system, will make it 2 gigs. But it's going to go through the SysMaster database and say, okay, here's the database, here's the table, here's the number of rows, and here's the bytes of that table. And it's going to do that for any of the big tables. So I know what my big tables are. And then I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm going to have it create a list of the small tables and another list just of the big tables. And this is what I use as my starting point. For these are what I call the normal tables. I do them as one job stream. These are the big tables that I do as a second job stream. It just takes a minute to run, and it gives me 3 unload files there that I can take a look at. If I look at the large tables, it says in this database, in the benchmark 3, I have 3 tables. In benchmark 2, I have 1 table that are more than a gig. It's a very quick way to find out. These are the tables I need to focus on and do in parallel when I'm doing this in real life. Second script, and I'm using SQL to generate SQL, so you don't have to hand do it, is I'm going to make an external table for every table in the database, both for the load and the unload. And I'm going to preface it with the name _ext_. You want it to have a unique prefix so that it's very easy to tell the external tables used for the load versus the external tables used for something else. You may have, in fact, we did a migration last year where they had a bunch of external tables, and I don't want to mess with those. So I picked a unique index. So I'm going to run it, and you can see this is going to create a SQL script called create external tables. And after I run it, I can come over here and run it. And now I've got external tables that I can use for unloading data. I also have a script I create to drop the external tables. So when I'm done, I drop them. Now remember, you got to be very careful and make sure that you use a table name scheme that is not in use already on your database so that you could drop just the ones used for the load. And again, I can come out here and see drop external tables, run it. Now, go to info, all my external tables are gone. I want the external tables there, so I'm going to recreate them. Once you've got the script, you can do it. Now, one reason that's key to get this scripted is one of the challenges I've run into is with agile development, people are making changes to their schema every 2 weeks. And it's really important to be able to dynamically get this data. And so, 2 weeks, you might do this, and then 2 weeks later, if you don't redo it, you're going to get errors because a new table's there, or a table that you had was missing, or a column has changed. So it's very important to get this data fresh every time you do it. Now, my fourth script here is make unloads. And it's going to make 2 scripts: unload small tables, unload big tables. And again, I'm using 1 gig here just for an example. I'm going to, in real life, would probably change that to 2 gigs. So I'm going to have 2 scripts. Now, this script I actually will take apart because this is a script I want to run in parallel. So if I had 6 CPUs and I wanted to run 6 parallel jobs, I would probably break this down into 5 scripts. But this way I see the tables I need to run. And now I can just pick up the unload big tables, and there are my 3 big tables. And it's going to take a little bit, so I'm not going to run it right now. But I can go look at my unload small tables, and they're my small tables, and it will go out there and unload them. I have the same kind of script to make loads. And again, it's just got load big tables, load small tables are the results. And it uses the external tables to read from a file. Now, what you have to do, and this is key, is when you make your external tables, you see here, data files, disk, temp. This is assuming they're going to be in temp. Typically, when I do this in real life, we take a NFS disk that we can mount on both systems. And so we change this to write them out to that NFS mount, and the vice versa, then it can read them from that NFS mount. So you want to be very careful on where you take them from. Another script I'm going to show you, do not run this. This will delete all your data. The only reason I did this was sometimes when we're doing loads, you really only have to unload once. And then you can run loads multiple times because the loads are the key part you want to get the timing right down on. Between each load, you may want to just truncate your tables. And so this is a very simple SQL script that will go out there and truncate all your tables. I'm not going to run it. I'm going to show it to you. It just says truncate and gives you all the tables. Now, this is what I think is the most important thing. And this has taken me the hardest one, the QA script. Very easy to write a script to do a select count from each table. What's harder is to identify a column to sum up. And I used to go sit down with the client and say, here's a list of your tables. Tell me the key column in each table that I need to sum up. And the next day I'd come back, have you done that? No. Next day I'd come back, have you done that? No. Next day I'd say, have you done that? No. That is very hard for people to do. So what I decided to do is pick the first decimal column in a table. And what I'm doing here in this script is going out there and looking for decimal columns. And it's going to take the decimal columns, put them in a temp table, and that allows me to build a script that says, I'm going to do a select, and I'm going to put the table name there so I know what the table is, account, and sum, and it's going to sum it from the first decimal column. Now you could do the last. To script this, you have to pick one or the other. What I've found is I'll take this then and say, okay, here's what my automatic script discovered. Tell me what I should do. And it makes it a lot easier for the client to say, well, this one, you need this. Then they're only thinking about 2 or 3 tables that need to be changed instead of the whole database. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to run it. It says it retrieved 9 rows. And I'm going to go here and look at my QA data check. And there's my data check. Now, this script is designed so you could also do it as an insert into. You can run this, insert this into a table. It will have the table name, how many rows are there, and a sum of the decimal field in that row. Here's an example. If there were no decimal fields, I'll put a 0 there. And then I could run this after I've done the migration, and boom, I have my QA. I can look at this and join warehouse in the new to warehouse in the old, and immediately tell if there are any tables that don't match. This makes QA so much easier to do. Last one I want to show you is one I added last night, so it's not in the slides, disabling constraints. And the reason I did this one is sometimes, let me get another window here. Now, I said at the beginning, start all this off with a DB schema. I'm going to pipe it through more. Every table in my database here has a primary key. And rather than messing with that primary key, what I find it's easier is just to disable all the constraints in the table. So I can create the new table with the primary keys, but then as soon as I've created, before I do the load, I disable the constraints. And then once I've done with the load, I enable the constraints. Now, this is something you need to think about because enabling constraints will turn on indexes those constraints were based on. And so you may want to break this down into the large tables and the smaller tables. And that will get you done. So I have the scripts in the slides. Questions. Before I do questions, I want to point out, if you go to our website, right here at the very bottom, since this is the newest presentation, I've got all the scripts right here and a link to the slides, the SQL, the project plan template, and they're available for you. There's a link in one of the early slides about that. Let me look at questions. Good question, Benjamin. The intervals and page size. First question. So Benjamin asked a question. I don't know if you guys are all seeing the questions. He's doing a migration of a very large database. And they want to do interval partitioning. and he wants to optimize it based on page size. First of all, both Art and I have SQL scripts that look at what we call waste. How many bytes are you wasting per page per table? I have that in my SysMaster scripts. You want to run that on your current database to get a good benchmark for what's being wasted. And I'm going to skip over here since I've got a little bit of time and go to my live. I'm teaching a class right now this week, and I just talked about this in class today. That's why I'm jumping over here. Managing disk space, bump. I have a little chart that I'll show you. This is what you want to do first. If it's not in here, then it was in another lecture I did today. There it is. So you want to build a spreadsheet like this. And Art has a script called waste. I have a SysMaster script that will help you with this. For every database table, you want the table, you want the row size, you want to know how many rows fit on 2K, how much is wasted, how many 4K, how much is wasted, 8K, so on down, and how much waste. This will tell you what the best page size is for that table. And here's an example of the formula to use for figuring that out. It's once you do that, then decide on the partitioning you want to use, because how many rows and how much space is wasted on page size don't really affect partitioning. Now, looking at the chat, are there any considerations to integrate access controls like AD into Informix? So this is a whole separate topic. Joseph asked a really good question. Can you integrate access controls like AD, PAM with Informix? The answer is yes. You can actually do it with earlier versions. We just did it for a client on version 12. I'm not the expert in our company on AD. Tom is, and but I know we've done that with version 12. You can do it in 14. It does take work, but it's very possible to get that up and running. Now, I have about 4 or 5 minutes left. I'm going to just jump through a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, I want to do a big shout out to the Informix user group. This is phenomenal. I've always dreamed about having user groups online like this, and the current health crisis has created a reason to do it. But I think this is the future. And so thank you guys for hosting this. If you're not a member, go join the IIUG. I say this in all my presentations, just do it. If you're interested, we're doing a free Informix tutorial series. And I've just finished in April one on logs. I have one next week on backup and recovery. We'll have one in June on connecting users. The idea is to do a basic sort of free set of tutorials for Informix users. Now, if you want to get more advanced, though, we have classes. And in July, Art and I once a year teach an advanced Informix tuning class. And in July, we're going to be teaching a class. It's all online now. I'm teaching a class this week that's all online. It's really fun. I lined all the servers up on what used to be student desks, so I can just turn around, and you know, hit a button if I need to, or get to one of them really quick. Each student gets their own server, and that's the key. So it's a performance class. We do benchmarks. We'll spend the whole week benchmarking. And the goal of the benchmarks is to learn what makes a difference. You make this change. Why did it make a difference? And both Art and I do it. And it's, I think, part of the fun. I always like working with Art on those classes. There's some things we don't quite agree on. So you'll get our opinions on the best way to do something that may be different. With that, I'll just say, I work with Advanced Data Tools. I founded the company. We've been an Informix partner from day one, and we do monitoring and support and training. And with that, I would like to say a big thank you. Yeah, I see one last question about Active Directory integration. I think that's a key topic, and I need to bug Tom about that. Maybe we can do another webcast on that soon. Well, thank you guys so much. This was a blast. I really appreciate this. And according to my clock, I'm out of time. According to the clock on the console, I've got a few more minutes. So if there are any other questions, I'll be glad to take questions. Yeah, if you ever have any questions after the fact, please feel free to drop me an email. And you've got my email right there. And we'll talk to you sometime. Maybe we'll have one of these again, or come attend one of our webcasts. So I guess I've got about 2 or 3 minutes later. If there are no questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I actually finished earlier. Oh, there's a good question. Windows services. I don't know about that one. You'd have to ask the folks at HQ. They have done a phenomenal job of running it. I assume it runs on Windows because it uses Java. And any place that you can run Java, I'm assuming it would run. I tend to, since the last question is on InformixHQ, I'll bring that up again. I tend to pick one server. Like in this training environment, I have 2 groups. This second group is actually for the lab we're going to do later today, where each of the students is going to set up a server here in InformixHQ. But we start the class with each student having a server, and they can see the status of it. And it just works out of the box. It's a really really good tool, and there's a lot more to do with it. So with that, I'll end. Thank you guys. Have a good day and enjoy the rest of the user day.